The blueprint for Maryland's future is really about a reimagining of education delivery across the state. It's probably been over 2 decades since a state has taken an initiative of this scope, Massachusetts, namely, being the last state to really kind of make this incredible investment. What I think is most important for people to remember about the blueprint is it's about ensuring that every Maryland high school student by 10th grade would be college and career ready, not or, and. And so that means that we have to prepare from pre-K to that point to ensure that young people have the tools, not just to compete within their city or county or Maryland, but honestly to compete with a global economy that will have a lot of emphasis on information. We want to ensure that our young people can remain competitive. But as we know, education isn't simply delivered by individuals, it is being delivered in spaces. And that's where Built to Learn comes in.
Is it working? Is it enough?
From what I've seen just going around the city and the state, it is working. People are putting these dollars to use. But as you probably know, there had been some unforeseen challenges with the bond market. There were also some momentary inflation costs related to the things you would need for school construction that I think slowed down the implementation at that time. But as things have stabilized, you're going to start seeing that pick up again. Because we all know those types of things, you can't really predict at the legislative moment that you put some of those funds into play, that the bond market might face some volatility, or that, quite frankly, inflation for construction costs, we're going to become, so sky high.
Do states need to do more?
I think every state needs to revisit how they're doing it. Quite frankly, I think we can't always wait for just a change in administration. It should be, in my opinion, kind of decoupled from who just happens to be the governor at any point in time, because these are responsibilities that are always going to be there no matter who's in charge or no matter what party they're in, because it's one of those responsibilities that we just have to provide. Maryland, for example, it's in our state constitution that we must provide a free and adequate education to everybody in the state. So this is just part of the charge of government to ensure that young people are given their best first start to be properly educated. So I would say every state needs to not only be reimagining or reviewing at minimum, are the needs being met by their current program?
Does the federal government have a role to help out, especially those districts in need?
I actually think it is unfortunate reality that there's such a lack of really kind of hands-on involvement on the capital needs of not just Maryland, but the country's school buildings, because I think we all kind of came out of COVID realizing how much school buildings were almost like the HQ for American life. They were not just simply places people were getting educated. They were getting food distribution. I mean, you name it. I feel like if people didn't know that school buildings and libraries were important, COVID was a big reminder that these were kind of the buildings that stood to help community members, whether they had kids or not. And I think that maybe we've missed an opportunity through this window of awareness through COVID to realize those same buildings that people who didn't even have kids were clamoring in to get food distribution and other resources. There are other professionals and kids that go into these buildings every day with such varied quality. And it is, I think, unfortunate that our federal government doesn't have a more hands-on kind of contribution to the support of those buildings.
When we toured Baltimore City schools, some of the school officials told me off camera, they debated about letting us see this. They said, we're embarrassed, we're ashamed. This was Franklin High. But unless the people see it, nothing's going to change. What is your view on this? You represent Baltimore, and there were floors collapsing. There were kids playing in a gym where the ceilings were falling in. Is this acceptable for our children?
No, that's not even, that's a whole sentence. No, these aren't supposed to be places that not only support learning, but it's also someone's work environment, right? So there's students there. There are people that have gained skills and credentials to deliver education. This is not a proper place to learn or to work. And I think that we all have to really not run away from that reality, because closing your eyes and putting your head in the sand isn't going to make those buildings look different than how you saw them. I am a Baltimore City public school parent. So I have 2 children in public schools. This matters to me. I'm a product of public schools. And I think that when you have more leaders at the table who have skin in the game, it's a little different. And I'm really proud that many of my colleagues in the Maryland, General Assembly that represent Baltimore, the vast majority of us, if not like all of us who have school-age children, have children in public schools. And I think that's so important, because when you go across this country, a lot of people that are in leadership roles around the delivery of public education are sometimes, they have divested from it so long ago, it's not real. this is real. Some of the buildings that you've seen that you're like, I can't even believe it. I could walk out of my house right now and find buildings that have that level of distress. Now, the good news is we've had some major investments in Baltimore City schools through the 21st Century Schools program. So we have 26 to 28 brand new schools online. I have one around the corner from me. And then right now there's a big phase that's focused on high schools, because in Baltimore City, you can live anywhere and go to many of our high schools based on if you want to attend particular specialized high schools. I definitely have seen bookends of buildings that I don't think are suitable, but also the promise of when you decommission those buildings and provide families and students and teachers with the proper tools, the confidence they have when they walk in buildings that befit their dignity and befit their potential. There's nothing like it.
How did we get to this point?
People didn't have skin in the game anymore. How many people that were boomers who went through public education, their dream was to not place their own children in public education? And then those people become leaders. It becomes a domino effect of people having influence and responsibility for things that they're not participating. And I can't say that we have to mandate that people participate in public school. I'm not saying that, but I think it's an interesting consideration for leaders that have to invest in these institutions. What does that institution mean to them if their most precious life contribution, their children, are not participating in it? My children matter to me, but also my constituents' children matter to me. And you only get one childhood, just get one. So we have to really, I think, move with a sense of urgency to address this, because it's not fair. And I think at the end of the day, I know that if Americans can put a man on the moon, we can make sure that every child goes into a building that is safe and promotes their learning and befits their dignity.